So I mentioned earlier that the Prophet Muhammad gave a particular way of doing zikr to Ali and also to his wife, who was the Prophet's daughter Fatima, as well as to other members of the early Islamic community. Not to everybody, but to select people. And the foundation of that zikr is to say La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. Or literally, there is no God but the God. It's a very interesting set of words, ilaha and Allah. Ilaha means any old God. Allah means the one true God. So this basic statement of faith, it rhymes, luckily, and it has a rhythm to it, La ilaha illallah. It even looks beautiful when you write it because there are only very few letters in it that get repeated over and over again. And so you find in Islamic calligraphy, it becomes an artistic trope that gets repeated over and over again in endless varieties, visually as well as in ways of doing zikr. But so saying La ilaha illallah, there is no God but the God, becomes the foundation for any kind of zikr. And then upon that you can do zikr on many of the names of God or the qualities of God that come from the Quran, some that don't come from the Quran but just come from people's experience. But the foundation has to be La ilaha illallah for it to really be an effective zikr. Then different Sufi communities have different ways of doing that zikr. Once it was given to Hazrat Ali and Fatima and Abu Bakr and some of the members of the early Muslim community. It got transmitted to different people in a wider and wider network of people. And as the Muslim community spread from Medina all across Arabia and then into Iran on the one side and Egypt on the other, all the way to North Africa and Spain, all the way over into India, different communities invented different varieties of doing zikr. So the Chishti Sufi order has particular ways of doing it, and then the Kaleemi Chishti Sufi order has a particular way of doing it. That's what I learned from my teacher, directly from him, and it's also written down in some of the basic books that Sheikh Kalimullah Shah Jahan Abadi wrote. One book that he wrote is called The Alms Bowl, the Kashkul, and that book tells in great detail about how to do zikr according to the teachings of his lineage. And so the basic way that we do it, and I sometimes teach people this when we do it in the Khanqah, not everybody pays attention to doing it this way, but for those people who do it, it's a good way to make the zikr more effective. And that is to sit like I'm sitting, cross-legged, and ideally we have the right foot behind the left knee like this, and so that it puts a lot of pressure on the nerves that are back behind the left knee. And then one sits cross-legged like this. It may not be comfortable for everybody, so it's not total necessity, but this is the way that the teachers do it. And then La ilaha illallah. There are 4 bodily places that the zikr is directed to. The left knee, the right knee or thigh, raising it up to one's right shoulder, and then plunging it down on one's heart are the 4 directions. La ilaha illallah. And the illallah, or there's no God but God, is said with some force onto the heart. And the idea is to pull these words through the various manifestations of your body, and I'll tell you the importance of these in a minute, and direct it onto your heart. And to dispel all the forces of darkness, all of the veils of ignorance, all of the egoistic preoccupations that surround the heart and obscure it, and keep it from being a pure and clean mirror to God's presence. And that's the basic idea of zikr, is it's a polishing or a sweeping away of the dirt that is around the heart. And the way of doing this with one's body makes it extra effective, I think. Again, the Chishti order always tried to find ways of connecting the inner spiritual work that they do to the outer world, whether that's in our body or in the social world or in the musical and artistic world. They always tried to find ways to have the outer activity help with the inner transformation they were trying to do. So the association of the left side is always with things that are bad, and the association of the right side is with things that are good. And so please forgive me for saying this, those of you who are left-handed, just reverse it in your own experience. But the left side is associated with the tempter, with Iblis, and with what we call shaitani forces. Shaitani forces are those that we talk about as shaitan, or the tempter, the forces of evil and ignorance and darkness. Those are directed toward the left knee. When you say la, you say no to those. And then you bring the zikr to your right knee or your right thigh, which the Chishti teachers associate with what we call nafsani forces, nafsani forces. Nafsani means related to the nafs. The nafs is the ego. So these are shaitani forces. These are nafsani forces. The forces of the tempter that's outside of us, the forces of the ego that's inside of us. And we say la ilaha, no God. The last syllable of la ilaha, the ha, we draw up to our right shoulder. And the right shoulder, the Chishti teachers associate with angelic forces or ruhani forces, which are the opposite of those shaitani forces. These are the forces of light, the forces of guidance, the forces of good conscience and virtue that can guide you. So you say la ilaha illallah, and the illallah is focused on the heart, inside the body, in the center, slightly to the left. And when we talk about the heart in Sufism, it's not the physical blood pumping organ of the heart, but it's a spiritual center in the body, in the nafs, in the soul, where the spirit contacts us and gives us life. And it's at that place where the body and the spirit come together, giving rise to the energy of the soul. That's pivot point, is what we call the heart. And that's the place that we try to direct with some force, this saying, illallah, there, but God. So there is no God, but God is the movement of that zikr. And it becomes a kind of a spiral that goes inward and down onto the heart when one does it. And often you'll find people moving kind of their head or their shoulders in that kind of spiral direction as they go la ilaha illallah. Some people abbreviate that to just moving the head in a circle. I've seen some Sufi groups in America kind of get the same rhythm by just moving their head without directing it on parts of their body. Sure. And I go into some detail about this, not to say that this is the only way to do zikr, but this is the way that my order has taught to do zikr. This is not the only way. There are many, many ways of doing it, even within my order. This is just the basic one. I also like it because it encapsulates bodily the idea that you're not an isolated individual. You are a complicated being in a network of beings. That is, you are a body infused with the spirit, and we think of the spirit as the breath of God. That the Quran says that God breathed into the human being of the spirit and gave it life. And so we have a body, we have a spirit, and the interface between these becomes the soul, or the nafs. That nafs can be in many different states, it has different levels, and that becomes a complicated teaching rooted in the Quran's message itself. But even just when you're doing zikr, you're acknowledging that there are forces of darkness, there are forces of light, there are forces of your ego. There's something called the heart, which is your great hope, that if you can keep it pure and clean, that you can receive guidance and you can receive blessings and you can enact virtue in the world. Yeah. And so in this particular way of doing zikr, where you go La ilaha illallah, the illallah, or the but God, is directed onto your heart, which we imagine as being about 2 fingers to the left of the center of the chest, which is roughly where the physical blood pumping heart is. But in this Sufi teaching, it's displaced to the left, but you want to get it into the center. And so there's a kind of a struggle and using zikr almost like a hammer blow on the heart to push it away from being displaced on the left, where it is physically, to being spiritually in the center, where it can be harmoniously the center of your being. And so that's why the teaching is to use a bit of a sense of a hammer blow, like you're striking hot iron on an anvil, because you're trying to enact a transformation in your actual body, in the spiritual apparatus of your body, to move your sense of your heart away from the physical toward the center, where it can be the spiritual heart. And as in our small group here in Atlanta, as we do the zikr, we start at a kind of a low level a low pitch and a kind of a slow pace. It's almost like a very slow march. La ilaha illallah. And we do that many, many times. Allahu la ilaha illahu. La ilaha illallah. 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 The idea is that at that low pitch and that slow pace, one is saying no God but God. La ilaha illallah. But the meaning of it is La ma'bud illallah. And ma'bud is a word that means there is nothing worshipped but God. So in that sense, you're putting out all idols or all competing deities that might be in your mind or in your experience. You're putting them out and you're focusing your worship only on the one God. So even if you're saying no God but God, the meaning is nothing worshipped but God. La ma'bud illallah. After we do that for some time, at a certain point, whoever is leading the zikr will raise the pitch, and that's a signal to everybody that we're moving to a higher stage, a next stage, and it goes a little bit faster. It usually becomes a little bit more intense, and that's a sign that the meaning has shifted to saying, instead of La ma'bud illallah, the meaning is La maqsood illallah. And maqsood means there's nothing intended or nothing aimed at. There's no focus except God. La ilaha illallah. 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 Maqsood means your goal or your focus. And there, the meaning of it changes from the physical world of I'm not worshiping any idol or I'm not worshiping any force other than God, to a more mental state. That is, I'm not aiming at anything except God. I'm not focusing on anything except God. It goes from the physical to the mental. And we do that for many, many times until its effect is hopefully felt by everybody. And then whoever is leading the zikr will push it a little bit, the pitch a little higher, and it will go a little faster also. And that's a sign that we're going into the more intensive, higher level. And that is, instead of saying La maqsood illallah, the meaning is shifted to La mawjood illallah. Mawjood means nothing existent. There is nothing in existence except Allah, meaning I am also not existing if my existence competes in any way with Allah. La ilaha illallah, 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 illallah. So those three words that we use to designate the meaning of these three levels of the zikr, they rhyme, and that's a blessing, so it's easy to remember them. The first is saying there is no ma'bud except God. There's nothing worshipped except God. The next is saying there is no maqsood except God. There's nothing intended or aimed for except God. And the third level is there's no mawjood except God. There's nothing existing in reality except God's existence. And at that point, the zikr becomes a little bit intense, or very intense if it's going well. And some people may even feel that the words are true, that they have no more sense of ego, no more sense of competing existence that is separate from God, and that God's presence is right there with them. That's the goal. But this is a very ancient explanation in the Chishti order for the levels of the zikr, and how saying La ilaha illallah can mean many different things depending on what level you take it to. And I hope the people who join zikr in Atlanta can feel that, even if they don't understand those words and the technical terminology to designate those levels.